Welcome everyone. My name is Nadeera Wijegoonewardene. I will be your presenter for today. I am currently working as a lecturer at the Postgraduate Institute of English at the Open University of Sri Lanka. So I will quickly go ahead and start sharing my screen. Apologies. Right, here we go. So I will be talking about linguistic landscapes in Sri Lankan suburbs, a study of multilingualism in Nugegoda and Mount Lavinia. So I will quickly run you through the introduction and the theory, where I will be talking about the social linguistic background of Sri Lanka, the suburbs that I will be focusing on, as well as the previous studies that are relevant. Then I will be briefly touching on the methodology employed and then move on to talk about the results and discussion, where I will be talking about the monolingual versus multilingual, the languages contained, the top-down versus bottom-up signs, as well as the idiosyncrasies and the presence of English, and then conclude by answering the research questions as well as my hypothesis. So here are a few abbreviations for you to get used to. Hope that took a second, and we'll quickly move on to the introduction. Right. I will start off by talking about a few definitions. Let me take my image off of the slides. Right, so the definitions of linguistic landscape. Landry and Boris say that the language of public road signs, advertising, billboards, street names, place names, commercial shop signs, and public signs on government buildings combine to form the linguistic landscape of a given territory, region, or urban agglomeration. And Backhouse, on the other hand, says any piece of text within a spatially definable frame. So you can see quite an exhaustive list by Landry and Boris, as well as a very broad definition provided by Backhouse. So moving on, I found it quite intriguing to conduct a linguistic landscape study of urban Colombo. I do have to mention at this point that this study was done in partial fulfillment of one of the courses provided by Professor Magnus Hooper during my master studies at the University of Gießen. So I found it quite interesting to see how certain linguistic landscapes could be studied, and that linguists could talk about monolingual as well as the multilingual implications of those localities. So I decided to look at urban Colombo and take two suburbs that I was familiar with, because I am Sri Lankan, therefore I am quite familiar with the Western province. So I picked Nugegoda, which is commercial as well as residential, and Mount Lavinia, which is commercial, residential, and due to its due to the fact that it's situated right on the coast, it's also touristic, well, pre-pandemic, of course. So for those of you who don't know, here is a small map of Sri Lanka. And we'll quickly move on to the theory. So let's get into the social linguistic background. For the purposes of the study, it will be quite brief. I have elaborated a lot more on the social linguistic background of Sri Lanka in my paper. So Sinhala is an Indo-Aryan language. It's spoken by the Sinhala community and other ethnicities in Sri Lanka. And Tamil is a Dravidian language, completely different root language. It's spoken by Tamil communities across Asia and other parts of the world. And they're mutually intelligible and it's extremely complex and vast. Then you have English, which can be traced back to the 19th century in Sri Lanka, and we can thank or not thank British colonization for that. And what's interesting is that English is spoken as a first language, a second language, as well as a third language in Sri Lanka. I've provided Mendis and Rambukwala 2010 as a resource if any of you are interested in looking it up. Then we have legislation, which is quite important because language policy and planning plays a huge role when it comes to linguistic landscapes and how that sort of trickles down to the society that we live in. So the Sri Lankan Constitution, Article 18, Section 1 says the official language of Sri Lanka shall be Sinhala. 2 says Tamil shall be the official language, and Section 3 says English shall be the linked language. So Sinhala and Tamil are official national languages, and English has this sort of ambiguous description of being a linked language, sort of perhaps linking the communities, if I say so myself. But this is sort of being ambiguous about how strong English is in Sri Lanka, how the need for English in Sri Lanka is quite often very powerful and has been so since colonization, and our structure and our administration is still sort of reliant on that old school system. Right. Article 22 and 23 provide for the languages of administration and legislation, and Article 24 provides for the languages of the court. And all of these legislation sort of provide that where the Sinhala speaking communities are stronger, which is in the Western province and the Southern province, the languages of administration shall be in Sinhala, the language of the court shall be in Sinhala, whereas within the Northern province and the Eastern province, there are more Tamil speaking communities. Therefore, the language of administration is in Tamil, and the language of the court shall also be in Tamil. And then I provide a few examples that are sort of in contrast to that, where English is sort of given priority, and which is the sort of reality of everyday life in Sri Lanka. So, high-end courts such as the Court of Appeal and Supreme Court completely function in English. And then you have the judicial and legal field, particularly within the Western province, will function in English. And you have legal commercial transactions and private sectors such as the textile industry, and industries like advertising and marketing completely functioning in English, and higher education and hospitality. Those are sort of, without saying, sort of goes with English, and sort of mirror the fact that most Sri Lankans are sort of taught the importance of English and sort of attaining English. And there's a sort of double-edged nature of having and wanting English, because in Sinhala, English is referred to as a kadua, which is like a sword. So it's almost carrying like this sort of burden of being a weapon that can be weaponized. It's quite interesting when you look at the social linguistic background. So let's quickly move on to the suburbs. So we have Nugegoda, which is a little inland, and Mount Lavinia right on the coast here. So you can see it does attract quite a lot of people, because Sri Lanka does have beautiful beaches, or well used to have beautiful beaches before, I suppose. So let's break it down per ethnicity, because the people who live in these suburbs are also quite important and say a lot about the ethno-linguistic context of a particular locality. So let's look at Nugegoda. I unfortunately have only the 2012 latest census in English that has been released. Certain departments are not so forthcoming with their publications when it comes. They're not freely available, let's say, when it comes to particular departments, right? So Nugegoda falls within Sri Wijegoonewardene Court, and we have a singular majority, and then we have a lot of different Tamil communities. So Sri Lankan Tamil, Indian Tamil, Sri Lankan Chetty, Bharata, these are all Tamil communities in Sri Lanka that are accepted within the census department as well. And then you have Sri Lankan Moor and Malay communities. They are Sri Lankan Muslims. And then we have the Burgher community. They're actually descendants of the Portuguese and Dutch colonization period. So fun fact, we were colonized by the Portuguese. We were colonized second by the Dutch, and then finally came the British, right? So we have a lot going on there. So the second suburb sort of falls between two divisional secretariat divisions, between Dehiwala and Ratmalana. So as you can see, the only difference you can see is that the Sinhala community is not as pronounced as in Nugegoda. And there are more minority communities in Mount Lavinia, right? So there are more Tamil communities, there's more Muslim community, as well as a bit more of the Burgher community as well. So moving quickly on to the previous studies. So for the purposes of this paper, I've sort of really congested it down. I've mentioned only a few. So Landry and Boris, 1997, looks at several provinces of Canada, focusing on the Francophone students, and looks at the sort of ethno-linguistic identity and language behavior in multilingual settings. Zenes and Goethe, 2006, looks at multilingual areas in Friesland, Netherlands, and Basque Country, Spain. Then we have Peter Backhouse, 2007, that looks at the very popular urban Tokyo multilingualism linguistic landscape. He makes use of the Yamanote line, and I believe he finds about 16 languages present in the multilingual setting, and it's quite interesting, very fascinating study. Then we have Sheng and Gua, 2017, that looks at the linguistic landscape of Singapore. And I found this quite interesting because Singapore is also home to a lot of multi-ethnicities and multilingual people, quite similar to, well, more similar to us, I feel like. And then from Sri Lanka, I was unable to find published articles, but I was able to find this conference presentation by K.L. Ramanandan from the University of Jaffna. And he talks about the sort of centrality of English and English bilingualism in Jaffna town, and the sort of marginality that Tamil signs seem to be occupying within the particular street that he studied. So let's move on to previous studies on that are sort of referred to or utilize Google Street Views. I was able to find Greta 2018 talking about the methodological issues and particularly bringing in examples from Google Street Views as well as URL link usage. And Hong 2020 was the only study I was able to find at that point of time, as of yet also, that utilizes Kakao Road View, which is synonymous with Google Street Views. Is the version of Google Street Views that they use in Seoul, Korea, because their sort of technology works in different apps that are South Korean owned. And this particular researcher looks at the Garibong-dong neighborhood in Seoul and relies on Kakao Road Views in order to collect data. Right. So even though I found a lot of references to the possibility, I didn't find any linguistic landscape studies that utilize Google Street Views entirely. So with the support of my professor at the time, Professor Magnus Huber, I sort of decided to utilize Google Street Views in order to look at this particular study. So the hypothesis I came up with was that English will be more prominently used in public science in the suburb of Mount Lavinia as opposed to Nugegoda. And the research questions are that one, is there a significant numerical difference in the use of English in public science between the two suburbs? Two, are all three languages present in all top-down signs? Three, what is the presence of Tamil in public science between the two suburbs? I do apologize, my face keeps appearing in the wrong place, I feel like. Right, methodology. Let's quickly move on. So I've identified the two linguistic landscape, the suburbs, and I calculated the distance between two bus stops in each suburb within the sort of city center. Excuse me. And then approximately 450 meters and 500 meters were calculated for each suburb. And the data collection was done through Google Street Views. It was collected during December 2019 and January 2020. Because I wanted to conduct a qualitative as well as a quantitative analysis, I wanted to employ manual tabulation so I could sort of sift through the data and sort of find very interesting pieces that I could talk about. All the data has been normalized by 100, of course, and the data analysis has been broken down in terms of monolingual versus multilingual, language contained, top-down versus bottom-up, and idiosyncrasies, right? And I do have to point out the limitations, of course, that the analysis will be limited by the data that I've utilized and will be applicable. Will be applicable to that data. Right, results and discussion. So let's look at the monolingual versus multilingual, and you can see that monolingual English sort of outperforms every other category. And this sort of points at this interesting trope where this is an island where most people either speak Sinhala or Tamil as a mother tongue, right? but then the public signs are so effervescently English oriented, and multilingual signs are more like a minority, like both on a 30% scale. And something that was also very interesting to note is the lack of Tamil monolingual signs, right? Excuse me. Because both suburbs have Tamil-speaking minorities. And there could be a few arguments made. One could be that they were not interested in it. There could be socio-historical reasons or socio-political reasons. Another sort of reason that can be argued would be the establishment of solidarity with their customers, right? Shang and Wu 2017 also sort of talk about a similar situation where they de-emphasize their own ethnic languages in order to sort of appear attractive to a broader audience that doesn't speak Tamil. So Shang Wu talks about Malay and Indian shop owners doing the same thing that Tamil business owners might be doing in Sri Lanka. Right. So languages contained. So as you can see, monolingual English heavily present in both suburbs. English and Sinhala again present. Interestingly, this format of English, Sinhala, and Tamil was only present in Mount Lavinia. And here is where we will see the Sinhala or monolingual signs and the Sinhala and English signs were more powerfully present in Nugegoda, sort of implying the fact that Nugegoda had more Sinhala speaking community or more Sinhala community. And what's very interesting and sort of lets us easily move on to our next section is the format of that is legally legislated for is the Sinhala, Tamil, English format, and that is equally present in both suburbs. Right, so top-down versus bottom-up science, quite important to sort of see how language policy and planning trickles down into actual society, right? So as you can see, Sri Lanka is quite a free country. Private vendors are able to just advertise as they wish to. So you see a majority number here. And the top-down minority, however, signs are quite equally available in both suburbs, and they follow that sort of STE format. And it stems, again, naturally to the provisions of the Sri Lankan constitution for where Sinhala, Tamil, and English in official communications is required for. And then we have my favorite part, which is the language signs. So this sort of puts sort of an image into the audience's head also, I feel like. So you have the format that we've been talking about, and then a fourth text of the name of the sponsor. This happens quite often. Private entities can sponsor things. Figure 4 was taken to sort of show how linguistically dense some of these images are in Sri Lanka. You can see so much text happening here, right? And it will have code mixing, it will have Sinhala, it will have English, and you can see there's a lot of advertising available as well. And most of this advertising is done by multinational companies, actually. And then we come to idiosyncrasies, right? And obviously, this is a better way of avoiding expressions such as error and mistake, as Backhouse says. And these are sort of typographical errors you're going to see across Sri Lanka. And then we have Hotel de Pilars. Love this. This is a very sort of casual idiosyncrasy that happens in Sri Lanka that is accepted as not a problem. Because everyone knows that these are late night street food vendors that sort of use the term hotel, even though they're definitely not hotels. And despite its very humble appearance, let me say, that their menus will be in English and their wait staff will be trilingual or bilingual. Okay, let's quickly move on to presence of English, right? I wanted to point out certain evidence of where this is not goes beyond mere chord preference, and it lies more in advanced humor or the realm of more sort of advanced marketing ploys, right? So this figure has 138. There's actually a play of words on one of the famous buses that frequents this area, sort of creating solidarity with the customers and goes beyond mere chord preference, right? It's not about prestige. And then we have Bridge of Soul, quite an old building, I have to say, from the 1980s. And this is actually playing with a pun with the homonyms SOULS souls and SOLES souls, right? Again, it's connecting to their product, smart. It's definitely making a pun, and it goes more in the realm of humor and sort of catchiness as opposed to prestige, right? Right, so let's quickly move on to the hypothesis. As you can see, the hypothesis has been proven, and Mount Lavinia does have more English signs. But if we go to the research questions, you can see that there is a higher numerical difference. Whether there is a higher numerical difference, I cannot say that, because the difference was only 2%. Whether all three languages were present in top-down signs. Yes, all top-down signs had that for the legally policied sort of format, besides like one emergency traffic sign that I saw in the data. What is the presence of Tamil in public signs between the two suburbs? Tamil had no excuse me. Tamil had more no monolingual signs, but had a minute presence in multilingual signs with a strong presence in Mount Lavinia. Right. So as you can see, this provides a very ethno-linguistically dense conversation for us about multilingualism in Sri Lanka, as well as the appearance of different languages within these two localities. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and some of the few things that I thought was important for future research would be the expansion of the data collection areas, as well as a sort of compare and contrast between the different provinces. I hope I didn't rush through the end. My time is over. Thank you so much. Here's my works cited page. Right, I think we end here. Right. Let me stop sharing my screen. All right. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a nice day. Bye-bye.